Welcome to The Explainer. So today, we're diving into the absolute, mind-bending sci-fi world of a story called The Gravity of Saints, created by writers Max and Claude. We're exploring a universe where morality isn't just, an abstract philosophical concept or a set of nice rules. In this world, morality is literally a detectable physical force. Seriously, what if being a good person literally made you heavier? Let's just sit with that bizarre premise for a second. Imagine waking up, stepping on your bathroom scale, and instead of seeing the aftermath of last night's takeout, you're actually seeing your good deeds, your kindness, your moral integrity. It's all staring back at you in actual physical kilograms. Every single time you help someone or act selflessly, you literally gain weight. It's kind of like taking the phrase carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders and making it terrifyingly real.
The whole foundation of this universe rests on something called the Doctrine of Mass. Over 2 centuries ago in the lore of the story, a physicist named Constance Halvorsen drops this paper proving that virtue literally has weight. She found that when living organisms achieve what she called moral coherence, basically when your deepest values perfectly sync up with your actual actions, you start accumulating physical mass. And we're not talking fat or muscle here. This is pure, measurable spiritual density. Over time, especially for super dedicated folks like monks and nuns, this virtue adds up so much that it becomes an actual physical structural reality. So here's our roadmap for the explainer. First, the weight of virtue. Second, the human anchors. Third, the physics of departure. Fourth, the fisherman's choice. And finally, the mobile grace. We'll be tracing our main character's journey from discovering his terrifying weight gain all the way to facing a completely impossible philosophical choice. Let's get into it.
Section 1. The Weight of Virtue, Brother Amos's Dilemma. Time to meet our protagonist.
This is Brother Amos Vael. He's an ordinary 29-year-old monk, but he's dealing with a wildly extraordinary problem. When he first got to the monastery of Penitent Breath about 6 years ago, he weighed a totally normal 61.4 kilograms. Today, he's sitting at 68.2 kilograms. Now, he hasn't changed his diet. He exercises the exact same amount. No extra fat, no extra muscle. In just 6 years, Amos has packed on nearly 7 kilograms of pure, unadulterated spiritual mass. Just by going through the daily motions of monk life, his moral density is going absolutely through the roof.
But here's the really cruel catch-22 of Halvorsen's physics. Amos doesn't even feel particularly holy. Actually, half the time he feels pretty hollow inside. But the scales, they don't care about your feelings. They only weigh your actions. So if Amos helps another monk lug a heavy crate of lamp oil just because nobody else is around, the universe rings that up as a virtue. The virtue is in the doing, right? Not the feeling. So just doing good things mechanically still makes him heavier. It's literally punishing him for doing his chores, trapping him in this crazy cycle of accumulation that he just can't seem to stop. Moving on to Section 2, the human anchors, saints as infrastructure. In our real world, whenever we picture saints, we usually think of these ethereal, light, floating figures, right? Like they're completely detached from the earthly plane. But in Halvorsen's reality, true saints are dense, floor-bending entities. They are so physically heavy with virtue that the literal floors warp under their feet. And the church, well, they realize that this immense physical and spiritual mass is incredibly useful. So they actually use these super dense people as literal load-bearing human infrastructure. I know. It's wild. And there is this terrifyingly calm, almost bureaucratic process for how this happens. Step 1. Once someone hits the critical threshold of 85 kilograms of accumulated spiritual weight and their coherence rating crosses 92, the system gets triggered. Step 2. The diocesan office sends out a rep carrying the dreaded blue folder. It's basically an invitation to fulfill your destiny. And Step 3, you're claimed, meaning you are bolted into a reinforced carbon fiber chair and permanently installed right into the stone floor of a cathedral. Officially, these folks are called stabilizing graces. By being bolted to these chairs, they act as human anchors, literally holding up the structural weight of these massive ancient buildings. But honestly, the more important part is that their immense moral density acts as a stabilizer for human suffering. Take St. Veronica's Cathedral, for example. There are 3 of these stabilizing graces sitting right in the nave. Their sheer spiritual gravity is what stabilizes the immense grief, trauma, and panic of 12,000 refugees taking shelter down in the basement. It's this incredibly beautiful yet completely horrifying sacrifice. Which brings us to Section 3, the physics of departure, fleeing the blue folder. So Amos's absolute worst nightmare becomes a reality when an administrator named Sister Margot shows up at his monastery carrying one of those blue folders.
Knowing he's dangerously close to that threshold, Amos makes a split-second, desperate decision to run. But here is the ultimate twisted paradox of his escape. Escaping requires bravery, right? It requires sacrifice, sneaking out in the dead of night, leaving a helpful note for the other brothers to fix a wall, fighting his natural urge to comfort a sad teenager on his bus ride out. All of these are acts of restraint and courage. And because of the ruthless physics of this universe, every single act of courage required to escape his own sainthood is tallied by his body as, well, sainthood. The very act of running away is making him heavier.
Now Amos definitely isn't the first guy to try and game this system. Take the abbot, Hieronymus Jew. He relies on this strategy called productive imprecision. He basically keeps his mass low by cultivating genuine, deep-seated self-doubt. Then there's another monk, Simeon, who actually made it to the cathedral but managed to drop his mass and escape by committing a deliberate, unheroic act, just flat-out refusing to be a useful symbol. For Amos, his strategy is kinetic flight. He's trying to flee into the messy, ordinary world to somehow put the brakes on his rising coherence reading.
Section 4. The Fisherman's Choice. Seeking the Ordinary.
So Amos travels way down south to this gritty coastal port city called Culzean. His whole logic here is that the only way to stop being good is to stop thinking about God and morality entirely, and just bury himself in grueling, ordinary physical labor. He actually gets this idea from a footnote in Halvorsen's original physics text about a monk who lost his mass by becoming a fisherman. The guy wrote, "The water is cold in the morning, and the work is very specific. I think about God much less than I used to." And Amos just completely adopts this strategy. He takes this brutal job hauling massive crates of ice and fish at the docks way before sunrise. The cold, the specific, exhausting nature of the work, it narrows his focus. And for a few weeks, he actually finds a little bit of peace. But then, bam, the shocking twist. A letter gets slid under Amos's door one day. The church? Yeah, they never lost him at all. It turns out the Institute for Moral Physics has this massive distributed sensing network that spans the entire continent. It literally measures ambient moral density passively, sort of like a weather station measuring humidity. The letter ever so politely informs Amos that, despite his freezing fish market job, his coherence rating has covertly ticked up to a staggering 91.2 out of 92. He is literally a fraction of a point away from the absolute point of no return.
And that leads us to our final part, Section 5, the mobile grace, a kinetic alternative. Knowing that Amos is right on the absolute brink, a high-ranking church official named Vicar Administrator Solon tracks him down directly at those freezing harbor docks. But here's the catch. Solon doesn't bring a carbon fiber chair. See, while your traditional structural graces are completely static and bolted down, Solon reveals that Amos is actually a kinetic saint. Amos doesn't gain mass through quiet contemplation in a room, he gains it through friction with the real world, through moving and engaging. Bolting a guy like Amos to a floor would just crush his spirit completely. So instead, Solon offers him this highly guarded, super rare path, the Peripatetic Grace, basically a mobile saint.
In this peripatetic commission, Amos would basically act as a walking coherence gradient. He'd be dynamically deployed directly into active, chaotic crisis zones. We're talking massive floods, collapsing hospitals, sprawling refugee camps. The idea is that just by him walking into a room, his sheer immense moral gravity would temporarily stabilize the collective trauma of everyone around him. It's almost like how a magnet instantly aligns scattered iron filings. He'd retain his legal freedom, he wouldn't be bolted to anything, and technically he could leave at any time, although, of course, the church's network would be monitoring him 24/7.
Now, on paper, that sounds like a pretty noble compromise, right? But Amos ends up confessing his ultimate heartbreaking fear to a friend he meets at the port. Listen to this gut punch of a realization. "I'm afraid that I will become useful, and being useful will become the whole of it, and I won't know it happened." Amos realizes that it doesn't matter if he's a bolted-down anchor or a mobile crisis responder. At the end of the day, he's still just becoming a tool. He risks completely losing his own fundamental human identity, just fading away entirely into the institution's utility.
And honestly, that brings us right to the profound core of this entire story. Amos is completely cornered by his own goodness. The universe literally demands his virtue, and the institution demands his utility. So put yourself in his shoes for a second. If you were Amos, standing on those freezing docks with the literal weight of your own goodness dragging you down, what would you do? Would you sign the paper to become a mobile tool for humanity, letting yourself disappear into pure usefulness? Or would you try to just keep running, knowing full well that every brave step you take is only making you heavier?
It's a seriously heavy thought to leave you with today. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and I'll catch you on the next one.